back, everyone. Today we will be doing the read-along for Bands of Mourning again. This will be the second half of part 2, or part 2.2, which will be the focal point of this video. You know, after we dug deeper in the first part of part 2 last week. We'll be picking up right where we left off, and you can find the link to that video just right about here, I think. After the band has arrived in New Seren, they split up the group into two parties, with Wax and Steris on the one side, and Wayne and Marasi on the other side. There's also Milan, of course, and she will be going with Wax and Steris for this part. Wax and Steris will be going to the party, you know, of Calasina. Yes, Calasina Shores. And Wayne and Marasi will be going to find the spike of her lure, and they will be going to the graveyards for that because they think people are robbing the graveyards, I think. So yeah, let's get right to it. I will not be going chapter by chapter for this one. Instead, I have chosen to first focus on the storyline at the party, and then afterward I will be focusing on the storyline of Wayne and Marasi going to the cemetery. Or cemeteries, I think, in this case. Yeah, but without further ado, let's do this. In the first part, we see Wax and Steris arrive by chariot at the party. They think it's too slow, or at least Wax thinks it's too slow, so they just get up and walk to the party. They just go on foot. They leave the carriage behind and go on foot to the party. They come across this beggar, and he throws a coin to Wax after he gets some money. He asks Wax for some money, and he just throws the coin for as change, so to speak. The more experienced Cosmere riders, or readers, I should say, will recognize this man as Hoyd, you know, our old friend, and actually the carriage rider for Wax in Shadows of Self as well. At the party itself, Wax is impressed by Steris and all of her preparation. They have to go in and then just leave all of their guns, and they get stripped entirely. Well, not stripped entirely, but, you know, stripped of everything, weapons. And Wax actually says that, you know, I could kill you with this coin. So it's kind of stupid for you to take away my weapons, but there's some kind of small response, not really being interested, so to speak. When he tries to pay with the coin at the bar, you know, that coin he received from Hoyd, he gets it back, and the waiter says something like, you know, I can't take this, this is too much, I would hate to be a, what did he say again? I would hate to have to take something with sentimental value, and only then Wax realizes that it's some kind of special coin. He discusses that coin afterwards with Steris, all the while noting that nothing has really changed from his youth during these parties, you know, having all of the backhanded insults and the compliments, which are actually insults too, and the political maneuvering and stuff like that. He says nothing has changed. So in a sense, it's kind of comforting, I think, for him to know that nothing has changed, even though he is rusty, which shows when he's actually mingling in politics, you know, with some old friends and some old enemies, some trade partners that aren't really rivals, some stuff like that. It's something weird, but it's actually a great small piece of not really information, but story. Hey, what's wrong? Yeah. He also comes across Chris from the White Sand novels. I haven't read those either, but she asks him about his powers and their uses in combination, or their combined usage is something that is more than the sum of its parts. Yeah, it's something like that. I can't really remember what it's actually like, but it's alluded to that his powers actually amplify each other when used in combination. He also goes to some kind of informant at that party with the coin, and he talks about the coin to that informant, and I'm not going to say he goes pale, but it's something, it's It's definitely something strange, that coin. And that informant actually warns him that there is a civil war coming. Not really saying that, but implying it between all of the lines, as happens in political maneuvering. Wax also gets into a little altercation with Kalasina, the host of the party, after which Steris actually vomits on purpose to make a distraction. She was prepared for poison, and this little pill, I think it was, causes her to regurgitate everything that's in her stomach. So she says, "Yeah, I'll make a fool out of myself and cause a distraction, just to save my husband, save Wax." She goes to rest in this guest bedroom and gets a steward as well, some Terrace woman. But after that, they actually walk the halls, Steris and Wax. When she hands him a smuggled handgun, it's in kind of an intimate scene in the sense that he has to help her get the gun loose because she has taped it to her upper leg and he has to go underneath her skirt. It's something. It's kind of cute, so to speak, because they actually seem not really at ease on the one hand, but willing to do it on the other hand. So it's again, this is a kind of slow burn for this romance, which will come into play later, actually. While walking the halls, Wax overhears some kind of speech about, Elendil's oppression and something like he already heard at the train station we saw just a few chapters ago, back in the first part of part 2. He also suddenly hears his uncle's voice talking to Kalasina. He overhears them, of course, pressing his ear to the door, and it's implied that everything that has happened so far has actually been a setup by the set, by his uncle Edward, to keep Wax distracted from not finding the spike and obviously finding the Bands of Mourning as well, because they are probably after the same as well, considering this is the title of the book, and these guys are an evil organization, stuff like that. When somebody's trying to get out of the room, Wax drops a coin and pushes himself to the ceiling, but then drops himself again to surprise them, gun in hand, and he actually sees that his uncle is not there. He only sees Kalasina and that same Terrace steward that was in the room with Steris while she was resting. But he sees the small little box on the desk where his uncle's voice is coming out of. So actually this is some kind of prototypical telephone, which is a new invention. This technology had never been used before because he didn't recognize it, at least. So if it's actually been invented in Elendil, or the outskirts of Elendil, it's something that has not been made public knowledge. Of course, he realizes immediately that he can talk to his uncle that way, and he screams at him, saying he's going to save his sister, what's her name, Telsin. But afterward, while he's saying that, he's knocked over by that same steward, who is now just a huge, strong woman. Apparently she can tap pewter, and she knocks him in the head, not really knocking him out, but at least knocking the breath out of him. And in a surprising, unexpected move, she takes his gun and actually shoots Kalasina instead of Wax, immediately letting go of all her pewter she's been tapping and turning back into this skinny terrorist woman, and screaming for everyone that can hear that Wax has killed Kalasina, setting him, actually framing him for the murder of Kalasina. Then she reverts back to her strong form and actually has a fight with Wayne, who's losing. He can't do anything. Every time he tries to shoot her, she's quicker, she's faster, she's stronger as well. So he can't really do anything. But he's saved by the bell, and in that I mean he is saved by Milan. She knocks over the terrorist woman and then just takes a punch of that big strong terrorist woman, not even moving an inch. She has an aluminum body at the moment, and that Steris woman's fingers are all broken, and it's even maimed, I think the word is used in the book itself. But yeah, that distraction causes them to be able to escape. Milan, Steris, and Wax. You know, Milan goes her own way. Wax just grabs Steris and runs away and just shoots off, you know, steel pushing himself away. And during this flight over the city, maybe it's because of the adrenaline, maybe it's because of everything that's happened, but he looks at Steris and he sees before him, not Steris, I mean, yeah, he does see Steris, of course, but he sees before him this woman for what she really is, this amazing, this gorgeous woman who is willing to put herself into danger and who is willing to put in the actual work for both the adventures and their relationships. And while he does have to think about Leslie, he immediately dismisses that thought, which is something that goes so suddenly that it's kind of you know, him just flipping a switch, saying that, okay, I might have loved Leslie with all of my heart, but here and now Steris is before me and she's everything a man could wish for. He doesn't really say that, but you know, that's kind of the gist of it. And he kisses her with every ounce of passion that he can muster. And that's, you know, the end of that chapter, I think. Or at least the end of chapter 15. I can't really remember, but that's the end of their solo story, so to speak, in part 2. Now to go to, of course, our other friends, Wayne and Marasi. They don't go to that party, as I have already mentioned, but instead they start going to this bank where they want to find the graveyard's workers' deposits, you know, wanting to compare those deposits to what they actually earn, because apparently that's all in the ledgers. Wayne is trying to immediately set up this big ploy and having himself disguised and all that, and Marasi just steps in, hey, I'm a cop, I'm a constable, give me your ledgers. And throwing her weight around is actually something that works immediately, because the banker has nothing to say and just gives her everything she wants to know. And while she's reading those ledgers, she notices that every single one of the graveyard's workers is crooked, meaning they are just taking clothes and jewelry and all kind of stuff off of the dead people and selling them on the black market. So they go back to that they go for the first time to that graveyard, which is adorned by the survivor, you know, Kelsier, just all over the gates, looking down on them. And this time Wayne actually disguises both himself and Marasi, and it works. They go to that graveyard's owner, the boss, or at least the keeper, and Wayne pays him, immediately digging up some fresh grave. You know, he goes to some grave that has just been dug, I think, and digs it up, you know, so they can check what's in it, and may or may not take it with them to sell it off on the black market. While he's digging, Marasi goes on this tour. Wayne stays with the guy, and Marasi finds Vin, the Ascendant warrior, standing around this I'm not going to say district, but at least sector of the cemetery where all of the poor people were acting as kind of a protector of the poor people, or ambassador of the poor people even, because, you know, she was a ska, Vin. And while walking around, she goes back, noticing that he has almost finished, or is almost to the corpses at that grave, when suddenly Marasi gets pushed into the grave and hears gunshots, you know, killing, of course, Deschamps, who is the graveyard's keeper. After the gunfight, they escape, because the gunfight was with, I think, what was it, constables? Yeah, that's kind of important to mention. It was with constables. Apparently, people knew about it. I don't remember exactly how it came about. But that being said, Marasi and Wayne go actually to search the gravekeeper's house, finding this ledger. Wayne finds his ledger first, but doesn't tell him. He is looking for something and finds his hidden his hidden stash of liquor. He also casually mentions that ledger he found, which causes Marasi, of course, to throw a small fit, blaming him of being in her way more than helping, which is debatable. in my experience or in my opinion, but you know what? It works, that's the important part, and she actually gets an idea. We get an immediate switch to another point of view. I think his name is Templeton Fig, and he is the manager of the city's graveyard district, so to speak. He's awaiting news from the graveyard, maybe from the constables, maybe from the shop, who knows. And suddenly the flames in his fire start moving, which of course for us tells us that there's a slow bubble around those flames, which is Marasi doing, or that there's a fast speed bubble around him, which would be Wayne's doing. It's one or the other. And something taps on the window and starts talking to him, and he, the person identifies himself as Death, which we all know is Kelsier's brother, Marsh, the Inquisitor from back in Mistborn Era 1. And immediately the body of the graveyard's keeper is deposited on the floor, you know, having been shot multiple times. And all at the same time, Wayne is well, we all know it's Wayne, of course, but Wayne, disguised as Death, is intimidating Templeton Fig into spilling the beans about the whereabouts of that spike they've been looking for, Relure Spike. A small village named Dulcing is mentioned, and they just go on their way. They release the bubble and go on their way. And 2 seconds, or at least, you know, while reading it's 2 seconds after, but immediately when they release that bubble, the flames start moving again, and the constables charge in, arresting, implying that Templeton Fig's been arrested. They go back to the hotel they've been staying at. This time probably by gondola, I don't know, it's not mentioned, but you know, their wax isn't there to steel push them there. So it's probably the old-fashioned way. They arrive at the hotel and see that Wax and Steris and Milan are not there yet. So just Wayne sits around reading this book about a rocket ship and just dismisses the idea as if it's something that will never ever happen. Something we probably did as well all those years ago. And Marasi is just pacing around, nervous as hell, until they come in. They come in flying, steel pushing. They exchange information and they all decide to head out to Dulcing. On the one hand, they all decide to go to Dulcing. On the other hand, Wax probably doesn't even have a choice. Being framed for the murder and all that, I don't think that it would be a good idea for him now to go back to Ellendale. Something Milan actually asks Wax, and he casually mentions it while smoking a cigar in a dark room. And that's the end of part 2. They just go on to Dulcing. I think this was a great setup for part 3, for everything that's to come. I especially think it was a great decision by Sanderson to split up the party, giving them their own storylines, because it helps building this new dynamic especially between Wayne and Marasi, in my opinion. But also giving more time to Wax and Steris separately to develop as people and develop their relationship or their love in the heats of battle. I do think that Milan's part was lacking in a sense that she only got a few moments of screen time, but I love the dynamics for our two duos, Wax and Steris becoming a loving couple, and this slow burn romance, as I've already mentioned, over multiple books even, considering we've seen her in previous books already. I think it's more realistic. I'm not going to say actually realistic, but more realistic than what we're used to in fantasy. Let's compare it to, for example, The Wheel of Time. I have noticed that some characters just fall in love, not necessarily with each other, but one falls in love with the other at the snap of a finger. And here it's more of a slow burn with actual feelings, with actual reasons to feel. Something that's lacking also in other books, I think. And next to their love, I think their actual dynamic and adventure is also great. It actually reminds me a bit of Luke and Leia. Minus the brother and sister part, of course. Because there's Luke, who has all the powers. The saber and the force and stuff like that. And then there's Leia, who has nothing. only her determination and her intelligence. And even though she doesn't have any powers, she still wants to be, and she still is a useful part of the mission. So in the sense, I think Wax is Luke, having the guns, having the allomantic powers, having the ferrochemical powers, and Steris being Leia, having no powers at all, but still being very thoroughly prepared, causing her to, always have a gun handy, or being at least useful to Wax, being always prepared, and is actually willing to take part in the danger, helping him with a gun, shooting that thug back in the first part with what's her name, with Renette's shotgun, and putting herself in danger just to help, or to be able to help Wax. Of course, Wax being framed for that murder will probably have consequences. In Ellendale itself, in the main city, or in the capital is the word, yeah. But those are worries for the future, because I have already read part 3, and I can tell you, spoilers, the Civil War is not a big plot point in part 3. It only comes to the surface in a very, very small way. That being said, I have not discussed our other duo yet, which is Wayne and Marasi. Everybody's favorite, of course, Wayne, or most people's favorite. These two are actually polar opposites of each other in character, but also in their not ferrochemical, but allomantic abilities. With Wayne speeding up the bubble and Marasi slowing down the bubble. Their dynamic, I think it's not used enough in part 2, in my opinion. They could have done more with that, but on the other hand, it does stake a claim in the sense that, is it connected to each other? The opposite in character and the opposite in allomantic abilities, especially with all of the identity and investiture talk we've had already in the book. I don't know if it's a consequence, but I do think it comes into play, actually. But as I have already mentioned, this will not be in this book either. I thought it was kind of lacking, but not really. I mean, it was not that important to the story. I just wanted to find out more about it. So it's lacking in a sense that I wanted to find out, but it's not lacking in the sense that it doesn't hinder the story in not knowing that. This storyline also helped me in the sense that they have cleared away all of my doubts about their romance. And let me tell you something, it's not going to happen. And if it is, it's very, very well hidden, because I don't see anything there. In contrast to some of the smaller hints in part 1 and the first half of part 2. I do like their dynamic, as I've already mentioned, with being opposites of each other and all that. Marasi is actually not afraid to shut Wayne down when he's letting his imagination grow, when he's going too far, in the sense that she just says that, no, Wayne, no ploy at the moment, as you've seen in the bank, just let me handle it, I'ma do it, and she throws in her weight, or throws around her weight as a constable. But on the other hand, as we've seen when they enter the cemetery, she allows him to do things his way, disguising both of them with Wayne's skills. So this contrast between Wayne and Marasi as characters, but also between Marasi letting him do stuff and shutting him down on one hand, is really what drives their interaction. And I think that is something that will have to be expanded upon even further in part 3, because I'm not going to say they have overtaken Wax and Wayne as my favorite duo, but they're catching up on them for the moment. I really enjoyed their cooperation in this part, which is a shame, because in the next part it'll be a bit different, so to speak. But I'll talk about that next week. And under all his goofiness, though, of course, we already know that, but Wayne is a skilled fighter. He's very skilled with his magic, his ferrochemical and his allomantic abilities, and has his particular set of skills, which can also be very handy. So in all fairness, he's a great ally all around. You know, he's just an idiot sometimes. And there's no other way to put it. Sometimes he is an idiot, he's goofy. And I think that's what makes him so lovable. On the one hand, he's so relatable, and on the other hand, he's just this badass, kicking and not shooting, but kicking and screaming bloody murder during fighting scenes. The plot itself is mostly built up for part 3. I think there have been some Easter eggs and some seeds planted here and there for part 3. Also some cool Easter eggs, of course, with Hoyt and Chris. But those will be more apparent in the next video. Of course, those seeds for part 3. And the next video, I will be covering the entirety of part 3 and the epilogue. I have decided not to split part 3 into 2 parts for multiple reasons, which I won't elaborate on here, and probably won't elaborate on next week either. But I've noticed that this is something that is, well, it can be split up because there's this nice point for taking off right after Dulcing. But, you know, I think it's better to see it as one part, because if I'm not going to say it's all one big Sanderlanche, but you know, the avalanche starts at the beginning of part 3 and it just builds up and builds up and builds up and builds up, which makes it weird to just cut it off in the middle. So I think I'll be doing a full part 3 breakdown next week. But I think that should not be a problem because it reads extremely quickly. Just because, you know, it's a Sanderlanche. We all know that you just want to flip through the pages one after another until, you know, you can't stop. Or, you know, you can't stop until you're at the end. After that, I'll also be covering Secret History. I finished that book last Saturday, actually, in between. And I thought it was amazing. You know, we see a lot of Kelsier that we did not know beforehand. I won't be going into this now because I'm not going to say if it contains spoilers for multiple books. And I loved it, especially after having read both eras of Mistborn. You'll see why if you finish that part 3, and you'll make some connections that you would not have made otherwise if you read Secret History before reading Bands of Mourning, which is something that I actually found great. I opted to read Bands of Mourning before reading Secret History, and I would recommend it just for the revelations. And on the other hand, you know, it's kind of like the Star Wars prequels versus original trilogy viewing order. You know, it's chronological on one hand, but on the other hand, there's this big reveal about who Darth Vader is, which means nothing if you've seen the prequels. So yeah, I think it's better actually to read Bands of Mourning first before Secret History, and that's why I'm going it that way. But for now, that's all, folks, and we'll be seeing each other next week for the Bands of Mourning part 3, but we'll be seeing each other probably tomorrow and Thursday for other content. I'll see you later, but for now, guys, mission accomplished. Good night.